Welcome to Legacy's Emergency Preparedness Training. This training is mandatory for all new hires in their first 30 days and for all employees on an annual basis. Unfortunately, workplace emergencies are a fact of life. Fortunately, they don't happen often, but when they do, the action you take can help determine the impact on you, your colleagues, and your patients. Your role in an emergency is vital, whether it's preventing a fire, reporting an incident, responding to the incident, evacuating the area, or helping others to evacuate. To minimize injuries, loss of life, and damage to the facility, we must all be prepared to act effectively in a variety of possible emergency situations. The main objective of this training is to help prepare you to act effectively and safely in an emergency. By the end of this training, you'll be able to identify hazards that could cause an emergency, report emergencies promptly, and carry out emergency responsibilities. You'll know how to evacuate quickly and safely, and how to respond to emergency situations effectively. When planning how to respond to an emergency, it's critical to assess what sorts of emergencies you might face so that you can be prepared to respond accordingly. As part of developing this emergency preparedness plan, we asked each clinic to create a hazard list. This is called the all hazards approach to risk assessment. The hazard list should contain any and all events or occurrences that could reasonably occur where you are. Consider risks specific to your geographical area as well as your workplace. What are some hazards you can think of? What comes to mind? What are the emergencies that you might have to deal with in your clinic? Possible emergencies that you may have to deal with little or no notice could include natural disasters, extreme weather, hot or cold, fires and explosions, chemical and biohazard incidents, and workplace violence. Later in the presentation, we'll review each of these potential emergencies, as well as others, and discuss how to report and respond to them. Natural disasters can create emergency situations directly or can cause emergency situations because of conditions related to the event itself. Hurricanes can cause severe damage and injuries. For example, the rains associated with a hurricane can cause serious flooding. While our clinics wouldn't be open during a close encounter with a hurricane, the aftermath of a hurricane, power outages, structural damage, flooding, could make it difficult or unsafe to resume services. Besides major events such as a hurricane, there are many possible causes of floods, including heavy rainfall or snowmelt, coastal storms and storm surge, waterway overflow from being blocked with debris or ice, or overflow of levees, dams, or wastewater systems. Flooding can occur slowly over many days, or it can happen very quickly with little or no warning, as in flash floods. In a flooding situation, it can be difficult or impossible for some employees to get to work. Others may be stuck at work after their shift. Parts of the facility may be affected by high water levels, and patients may have to be moved for their safety. Tornadoes strike quickly and move on. In addition to personal injury, the damage from high winds and severe thunderstorms associated with tornadoes can cause power outages, gas leaks and the potential for fires, danger from downed power lines. Earthquakes occur with little or no warning. They may cause structural damage to the building and could cause injury to patients and employees. Think about the kinds of natural disasters you could face where you live. This map shows areas of greatest risk for natural disasters. States in which Legacy has rehab agencies are marked with an X. As the legend on the left shows, moderate earthquake risk is depicted in yellow, high risk in dark red. Areas of greatest flooding risk are indicated by the orange color. Hurricane risk areas are indicated by blue, and the areas of the greatest tornado risk are shown in red. Bear in mind that these are areas with the greatest risk. It doesn't mean that, for example, an earthquake wouldn't happen in northern Ohio or in Florida. Most states have several risks. All the states on the East Coast have hurricane and flooding risks, and some of those also have earthquake or tornado risk. Here's a representation of only tornado risk. Again, there's no area of no risk, only areas of low risk. Hurricane risk is shown in this graphic. These are the areas where hurricanes are most likely to have a direct impact. As you know, once a hurricane makes landfall, it can continue inland and cause serious problems with excessive rain and high winds, even after it is downgraded to a tropical storm or tropical depression. People up to hundreds of miles away from the site of landfall should pay attention to the forecasted path of the storm and make appropriate preparations. At what time of the year are hurricanes most likely to occur? The Atlantic hurricane season runs from June 1st to November 30th, with the peak occurring between mid-August and late October. Severe weather is any atmospheric phenomenon that can cause property damage or physical harm. During times of extreme weather, such as a frigid cold winter or unusually hot summer, the failure of climate control systems can create harmful and fatal conditions, especially for people who are in poor health, frail, or aged. Snow and accompanying ice can immobilize a region and paralyze a city. Ice can bring down trees and break utility poles, disrupting communications and utility service. It can also immobilize ground and air transportation. Other weather systems can bring severe weather that can be hazardous. These events may require action to take cover or may only require waiting until the danger has passed before venturing outside. Fires are a leading cause of healthcare facility emergencies, and electrical problems are a common cause of those fires. Electrical fires can be started by overloaded electrical outlets or circuits, damaged insulation on wires and cords, damaged plugs, or malfunctioning electrical equipment. Think about the electrical fire hazards in your work area. Do you know what you should do if you discover malfunctioning electrical equipment or a damaged cord, or plug, or wiring? You should notify your supervisor and get those situations corrected. Another type of fire hazard and potential cause for an emergency is flammable chemicals. Flammable liquids and gases must never be stored near heat sources, such as hot machinery. Safety data sheets contain valuable information about chemical fire hazards and safety procedures. Be sure to read the safety data sheet before using, dispensing, or storing any flammable liquid. Labels also provide important safety information, so check the label as well before handling a flammable chemical. Make sure you know if there are flammable liquids in your clinic. Smoking is not only an issue around flammable chemicals, it's a hazard anywhere around the facility. And failure to maintain clean and neat work areas can also lead to fire emergencies. So to prevent fires, make sure that smoking only occurs in designated areas and that cigarettes and matches are completely extinguished. Keep your work area clean and neat and properly dispose of fire hazards such as combustible trash. Be sure you know the facility's smoking rules and the location of designated smoking areas. An unintentional explosion can result from a gas leak in the presence of an ignition source. These leaks and explosions can occur in building lines, infrastructure pipelines, or transportation. The principal explosive gases are natural gas, methane, propane, and butane because they're widely used for heating purposes. However, many other gases like hydrogen and acetylene are combustible and have caused explosions in the past. Gas explosions can be prevented with the use of intrinsic safety procedures to prevent ignition. Leaking chemicals can also lead to a serious emergency situation. While you're not likely to encounter a dangerous chemical leak inside your clinic, there may be risk from the facility's equipment and operations. In addition, the release of a hazard material in the community at large could create an emergency situation. Some signs of a chemical spill that can lead to an emergency include a leaking container of any hazardous substance, strong chemical odor, or a visible discharge of liquid, powder or dust around a container known to contain a hazardous material. Report any signs of leaking chemicals to a supervisor right away. Don't attempt to clean it up unless you've been properly trained and equipped. Notify your supervisor of a chemical spill right away. Think about the chemicals you work with or around. Are you aware of their hazards, where they're stored and what they look and smell like? Make sure you know where the safety data sheets are kept. Hazardous materials incidents occur when a hazardous substance has been dispersed into the environment in a manner that has the potential to harm people. These emergencies can result from the release of toxic substances in any quantity, the release of large quantities of a substance that's not problematic when it's used in smaller or controlled amounts, or from the results of combining two otherwise non-hazardous substances. The release can be in a vapor or aerosol, liquid or solid form, and could be accidental or deliberate. Accidents in the greater community, such as spills or leaks related to train or truck accidents, or radiation leaks, will be reported through local authorities. In our clinics, we also have to be concerned about biohazards. Contagious diseases can spread through the community and the facility, causing emergency conditions. For example, flu epidemics or the spread of some other highly infectious disease could create a serious emergency for the facility. Foodborne illnesses can spread quickly through a healthcare facility, making both staff and patients sick and creating a health emergency. Some forms of mold are toxic, and if identified within the facility, could require the evacuation of affected parts of the building. Violent acts, either in the workplace or in the community, could also cause an emergency situation for your clinic. For example, incidents of workplace violence committed by co-workers, patients, or visitors, or strangers could lead to an emergency situation, including possible injuries from assaults or the use of weapons. A civil disturbance, such as a riot or violent protest in the community, may have an indirect impact on the clinic by requiring staff to remain in place until the situation is resolved. Sadly, we have to also be concerned about acts of terrorism, such as bombings, that could result in disruptions in utility service, transportation, and travel, in addition to injury and other hazards. So now it's time to ask yourself if you understand the information that's been presented so far about workplace hazards that could cause emergency situations in your clinic. Could you list the hazards that could cause emergency situations? It's important for your safety, as well as the safety of your patients and visitors, that you understand this information. Now, let's continue and discuss being prepared to respond effectively to workplace emergencies. This section covers general responses to emergencies, knowing who to call, understanding your role in emergency responses, and evacuation guidelines. We'll discuss specific scenarios in the final section. Emergency. you may have only seconds to act. Whether it's a fire, natural disaster, or some other crisis, you must be prepared to move quickly and effectively to protect your own safety as well as the safety of coworkers, patients, and visitors. That's why you need to find out what you need to know about responding to an emergency now. You can't wait for an actual emergency when there won't be time to ask questions. Ask your questions now. You also have to prepare yourself to act effectively. Review all the steps you'll have to take and realize that you might need to act under very bad conditions such as thick smoke, heat, and little or no light to guide you. Drills and emergency simulation will help prepare you for the real thing, so be sure to participate so that procedures remain fresh in your mind. Also take the time to become familiar with the details of the facility's emergency plans. Finally, always keep emergency exits clear so that everyone will be able to get out quickly and safely should an evacuation be necessary. Make sure you know how to report an emergency. You should know the location of alarm boxes and how to activate them. You should know who to call in the event of an emergency and what information to report about the situation. So in any emergency, call 911 as soon as it's safe to do so. And you should be prepared to report your location, the nature of the situation. For example, is it ongoing or is it over? And whether there are injuries. For hazmat situations like chemical spills, biohazards, or hazardous waste incidents, report the name of the substance if you know it, the location, and the approximate quantity involved. It's also important that you understand and are comfortable with any emergency responsibilities that you have been assigned. Legacy's policy is that the person responsible for initiating an emergency response in anticipated events such as a tornado, that person's the rehab director or therapy services coordinator. If that person is not available, there should be a previously designated staff member to take the lead. Everyone should understand and follow emergency procedures. In the case of an emergency, you must ensure the safety of staff and any patients in the clinic. So understand whether the situation calls for evacuating the clinic or sheltering in place, and get the disaster kit. Handle only emergency tasks you've been assigned and trained for. Only properly trained and equipped personnel should handle duties such as firefighting or chemical release or hazardous waste cleanup, handling biohazard materials, shutting down power and other systems and equipment, and patient and staff evacuations. So make sure you understand exactly what is expected of you. If there's anything about an emergency responsibility that you do not fully understand, ask your supervisor to explain it to you. And finally, carry out your emergency assignments only if you can do so safely. Don't, for example, return to a burning building or risk your life in an attempt to save others. Let professional emergency personnel, such as firefighters, handle life-threatening situations. That's what they are trained to do. If an emergency situation calls for removing patients from the clinic, it's important to understand the patient's condition. Will the patient require assistance of more than one person? Considering both physical and cognitive functioning, can the patient remove him or herself safely to a designated location? In other words, if you direct a patient to return to his or her apartment or room, can he or she do that independently? Make sure you know where the designated safe areas are, both inside and outside the building. Make sure you know how to get there, and that you know more than one way to get there. When the order to evacuate the facility is given, you have to be prepared to move quickly and efficiently. Have at least 2 escape routes from your work area. The alternate route is in case your primary route is blocked by fire or smoke or is unsafe for some other reason. Know where emergency exits are located in other parts of the facility in case you're not in your work area when the emergency alarm sounds. For example, you should know how to evacuate the building safely from restrooms, a cafeteria or dining room, from resident rooms and common areas. finally, make sure you know your assigned assembly area outside the building where you are to report for roll call. This is so that emergency response personnel will know you're safely out of the building and they won't put themselves at risk looking for you. These are the procedures to follow during an evacuation. Recognize the evacuation signal and listen for instructions. Alert co-workers and patients and urge them to remain calm. Go directly to the nearest safe exit. Move quickly but calmly. Follow directions of emergency response personnel such as firefighters and police. Proceed to the assembly area and stay clear of emergency personnel and vehicles, and listen for further instructions. Don't leave the area until instructed. Don't go home or try to return to the building until you're told to do so. If evacuation isn't possible and the safest location is the clinic, the patients, any visitors, and staff must shelter in place. This means to remain in the clinic until the conditions are safe for evacuation or for residents to return to their rooms or apartments. Locate the disaster preparedness kit. Listen to the local news to assist with determining the conditions outside of the clinic and when either evacuation or returning residents to their rooms and apartments is possible. Contact the facility to coordinate with them if needed. If you're injured, tend to yourself first if needed before trying to help others. Call 911 if medical assistance is required immediately. Otherwise, wait until the conditions are conducive to leaving the premises safely. Make sure you understand all the information that's been presented in the previous slides about emergency reporting and evacuation procedures. This information is vital to your safety and the safety of your coworkers, patients, and visitors in an emergency. It's important for you to understand all the details. So please ask your supervisor any questions you have about how to report and respond to an emergency. Now we'll talk about specific steps you can take to respond effectively to fires, chemical, and biohazard incidents. Quick and effective response to a fire can prevent an emergency situation, or at least minimize the risk to staff and patients. So here's a step-by-step description of what to do. When a fire is discovered, your first action should be to remove yourself and patients from immediate danger. Then trigger the alarm to notify others of the danger. Find a fire extinguisher or a fire hose. Even if you're not trained to use the extinguisher or you're not comfortable using the extinguisher, go and get one and bring it back to the scene so that your supervisor or someone else can use the equipment. If necessary, call for additional help. When you're fighting a fire, continually evaluate the situation to make sure it's still safe to fight the fire. Finally, don't try to fight a large fire or a large, rapidly spreading fire with a fire extinguisher. Evacuate and let professional firefighters handle the situation. You should fight only small, contained fires. That is, fires that are just beginning and can be controlled by the use of portable fire extinguishers. So, you've retrieved the fire extinguisher. Now what? You can easily remember the 4 steps for using a fire extinguisher by thinking about the word pass. P is for pull the pin. A is for aim at the base of the fire. S is for squeeze the trigger. And the second S is for sweep. So pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep. Most extinguishers are emptied in less than 1 minute, so aim carefully. After the fire, when it's safe and practical to do so, complete the fire or fire drill report form. It's found on the intranet under Downloads, Forms, Conditions of Participation. Chemical and biohazard incidents. Here we're talking about spills or leaks of toxic chemicals and the release of infectious or toxic biological substances. The safety data sheets for substances in your clinic provide information regarding potential hazards as well as instructions for cleaning up a spill of the substance. So make sure you know where the safety data sheets are in your clinic. So here's how to respond to a chemical or biohazard emergency. First, get the disaster kit and keep it at hand. Evacuate the area immediately if you suspect a problem and notify others to leave as well. If possible, shut doors and windows to keep the hazardous material contained in one area. You may need to seal gaps under and around doors, windows, and vents. You can use wet towels rolled up and stuck under the door, duct tape with wax paper or aluminum foil to cover gaps and vents. Notify a supervisor right away. If you're the supervisor, notify the appropriate facility personnel, like the administrator or healthcare coordinator or some other key person. If it's a flammable chemical involved, make sure there are no ignition sources. Remove them if it's safe to do so, and don't return to the area until you're told it's safe. If gas or vapors could have entered the building, take shallow breaths through a cloth or a towel. Remember that smoke from a fire is an airborne contaminant. Anyone overcome by smoke or other airborne contaminants should be relocated to an area where there's fresh air. How to respond to natural disaster emergencies. Even if you can't know exactly when a natural disaster will strike, there are some weather-related events that you can anticipate. Those include severe weather, such as thunderstorms that could produce tornadoes, and winter storms. So be aware of National Weather Service advisories, watches, and warnings so that you can be prepared. So what's the difference between a watch and a warning? As you can see here, the watch indicates that conditions exist that could produce a particular event, such as a severe thunderstorm or a tornado or a winter storm. A warning indicates that severe weather is actually occurring or is about to occur. So severe thunderstorm with strong winds and hail, or a warning for tornado means that one has formed. A winter weather warning means that there's either freezing rain or heavy snow already occurring or imminent. Unlike a tornado that forms quickly, we have days of notice about an approaching hurricane. In some places, a direct hit would be possible. In others, the greater likelihood is of associated effects, such as high winds and heavy rains. Excessive rain may lead to flooding. Because it's possible to anticipate these conditions, there's time to prepare and to anticipate the decisions that might need to be made regarding your staff and clinic operations. Follow the National Weather Service for new watches and warnings. Decisions regarding opening or closing the clinic should be made with staff safety in mind. Unlike hurricanes, tornadoes arrive with very little warning. In a tornado, the priorities are to get staff and any patients in the clinic to the safest location and remain there until the storm has passed. In the aftermath, you may have to deal with injuries, severe damage to the facility, water and power outages, impassable roads, and more. In the event of a tornado warning, visitors and personnel should seek shelter in the safest places in the building. Usually that's a basement or interior rooms. If the clinic is located in a high-rise building and you can't get to a basement, go to interior hallway areas and stay away from windows. Small rooms are typically safer than larger rooms. Pre-select the safest place and document that location. All desktops and workstations should be cleared of paper and documents. Close all windows, curtains, and blinds. Tune to a local radio station for continuous weather information on the battery-operated radio provided in the disaster preparedness kit. If the building is struck, cover your head and neck to protect yourself from falling or flying debris. Remain with your clients and demonstrate calm. The average tornado lasts only 8 to 10 seconds. Wait for the weather station or the facility to issue an all clear. When it's safe and practical to do so, complete the tornado and/or tornado drill report form found on the intranet under Downloads, Forms, Conditions of Participation. All employees must identify the safest space location and review the route to the safest place. Perform a practice drill for accessing the safest place at initial orientation and at least annually thereafter, and document this on the annual mandatory in-service log. Flooding can happen in any U.S. state or territory. It's particularly important to be prepared for it. If you live in a low-lying area near a body of water, such as near a river, stream, even a culvert, along a coast or downstream from a dam or levee. Just 6 inches of moving water can knock you down, and 1 foot of moving water can sweep your vehicle away. Flooding can occur slowly over many days or happen very quickly with little or no warning, as in flash floods. So if flooding is occurring, move immediately to higher ground or stay on high ground. If your patient is a resident of the facility where the clinic's located, you may need to escort him or her back to the residence so they can follow the emergency preparedness program of the facility. You should evacuate if directed by local emergency management officials or the facility. Avoid walking or driving through floodwaters. Turn around, don't drown. Remember, just 6 inches of moving water can knock you down. After flooding, return only when authorities say it is safe. Be aware of areas where floodwaters have receded and watch out for debris. Floodwaters often erode roads and walkways. Avoid standing water as it may be electrically charged from underground or downed power lines. During an earthquake, visitors, patients, and personnel should drop down onto their hands and knees if at all possible, or at least assume a sitting position. This is to reduce the risk of the earthquake causing falls. Individuals who use wheelchairs or other mobility devices should lock their wheels, bend over, and remain seated until the shaking stops. Everyone should cover their head and neck with their arms to protect themselves from falling debris. If an individual is in danger from falling objects and can move safely, then he or she should crawl for additional cover under a sturdy desk or a table. If there's no sturdy shelter nearby, then get away from windows and next to an interior wall. Stay away as best you can from glass, windows, outside doors and walls, and anything that could fall, such as light fixtures or furniture. Hold on to any sturdy covering and stay in place until the shaking stops. Do not run outside during the shaking, and do not get in a doorway, as this does not provide protection from falling or flying objects. If getting safely to the floor to take cover won't be possible, make sure you move away from windows and objects that could fall on you, and protect your head and neck with arms, a pillow, a book, or whatever is available. When the shaking stops, if you're injured, tend to yourself before helping others. Locate and familiarize yourself with the contents of the disaster preparedness kit if possible. Check around for damage to the building. If there's a clear path to safety, assist the visitors, patients, and staff to leave the building and gather at the predetermined assembly area. It may not be the same place as for a fire evacuation, so make sure you know where that is. Choose to go to an open space away from damaged areas, trees, and power lines. If you leave the building, take your personal belongings, such as wallets, purses, coats, and phones. Don't use elevators. If you're trapped, don't move about or kick up dust. If you have a cell phone with you, use it to call or text for help if needed. You can tap on a pipe or a wall so that rescuers can locate you in the event assistance is needed. Once you're safe, Monitor local news reports via the battery-operated radio, social media, and cell phone text alerts for emergency information and instructions. Assist with rescues if you can do so safely. Be prepared to drop, cover, and hold on in the likely event of aftershocks. Wait for the weather station, emergency personnel, or facility to issue an all clear. Much like an earthquake, there will likely be no time to prepare for an explosion. So the important thing is to know how to respond should an explosion occur. Visitors, patients, and staff should get under a sturdy table or desk if objects are falling. When objects stop falling, tend to yourself first before helping others. Then, assist visitors, patients, and staff to leave quickly, watching for obviously weakened floors and stairways. Do not use elevators. Do not stop to retrieve personal possessions or to make phone calls. Stay low if there is smoke. Check for fire and other hazards such as gas leaks or dangerous debris. Once you're out, don't stand in front of windows or glass doors or other potentially hazardous areas. If you're trapped in debris, use a flashlight or tap on pipes to signal your location to rescuers. Shout only as a last resort to avoid inhaling dangerous dust. Cover your nose and mouth with anything you have on hand. Most of the hazards we've discussed could cause a power outage. Power outages can also occur randomly due to operational issues not related to weather or disasters. A power outage may not constitute an emergency for the clinic, but it can impact operations. Even during the day, interior rooms may be quite dark if the lights go out, so use caution when moving about. Some buildings have generators for backup power, but power may be restored to only certain parts of the building. Only use flashlights for emergency lighting. Candles can cause fires. If your patient is a resident of the facility where the clinic is located, you may need to escort him or her back to their residence. Only do so if you have an adequate light source. Turn off or disconnect appliances and other equipment in case of a momentary power surge that can damage computers and other devices. Surge protectors are designed to avoid damage to electronic equipment. Contact facility key personnel or the power company to gather information about how long the outage is expected to last. Although Legacy has a zero-tolerance policy for workplace violence and strives to maintain a safe working environment, there's always the possibility it can occur. Be aware that a violent situation could begin with our staff in the facility where the clinic's located, visitors to the facility, or family members of staff or residents. It's also possible that someone from outside the workplace would create a dangerous situation. So what is considered violence? Verbal, written, and physical threats are considered violence, as well as the more obvious examples of someone armed with and using a weapon such as a knife or a gun. Any employee who becomes aware of any circumstances in which a person threatens or causes physical harm to another must immediately report the matter to the most readily available person in authority and, as soon as practicable afterwards, report the incident to HR. If the safety of the patients, visitors, or staff appears to be in immediate danger, the following procedures should be followed. First, remove yourselves from danger. Don't wait for others who choose not to leave the area. Call 911 if possible. However, if it's not safe, wait until it is safe to do so. Follow the instructions of a police officer or emergency operator. Don't attempt to move any wounded individuals. Evacuate if there is an accessible escape path. Attempt to evacuate the premises. Have an escape route and a plan in mind. Evacuate regardless of whether others agree to follow. Leave your belongings behind. Help others escape if possible. And keep your hands visible as you leave the building. Prevent individuals from entering an area where the violence is occurring. If the situation warrants, you may need to barricade the clinic door. If evacuation is not possible, hide yourself and assist others to hide. Do not leave until an all clear is given. If there's an emergency, call 911 first. If there's a pending severe weather event, stay tuned to local weather advisories. Rehab directors and therapy service coordinators should communicate with the executive director or other key personnel in the facility when possible in regard to emergency situations. The primary method of communication is the clinic telephone. In the event the clinic phone isn't working, the alternate means for communication would be personal cell phones. Each clinic will have a list of contact information for the following: staff, supervisors, the corporate office, facility key personnel, and local emergency agencies. The emergency management plan will be a bit different from clinic to clinic depending on your geographic location and the layout of the building that houses your clinic. You'll be required to test the plan at least twice each year. Testing activities may include drills, which will be conducted without advance notice, or an extended drill or full-scale exercise in coordination with the facility or community emergency management agency, or we may conduct tabletop exercises. You should also be ready to answer questions from surveyors regarding your emergency plan. Remember that a survey can happen at any time for various reasons. If an actual event requires activation of the emergency response plan, a report of your response will count as one full-scale exercise and will meet the full-scale exercise requirement for 1 year. Following each testing activity or actual emergency event, an after-activity report must be completed. This report is designed to review your clinic's response to determine if the response was effective and to identify any areas of needed change. Following every testing or actual event, the after-activity report should be completed by the rehab director or TSC and sent to the practice manager or agency administrator if there is no practice manager. The practice manager or agency administrator will review the form and make note of any changes needed to improve the response or the plan. The form with these recommendations will be forwarded to the Director of Compliance, who will review all submitted AARs and make recommendations for changes to the advisory board. The most important reason to train and test is so that you will know what to do in the event of a real emergency. Your safety and the safety of your coworkers and patients depends on it. So understand what the hazards for your clinic location are. Know how to report an emergency and how to carry out your emergency responsibilities. Have a discussion with your team about what each person's responsibility will be. Make sure you know the primary evacuation route and that you have an alternate route. Keep clinic exits clear. Designate a place to meet after evacuating the clinic. You should know how to respond effectively to emergency situations that may occur. Finally, you need to know the communications plan for relaying and gathering information related to emergency events and clinic operations. The Emergency Preparedness Plan and all associated documents will be housed on the intranet at the pathway shown. Downloads, Policy and Procedures, Emergency Preparedness Plan. Now that we've concluded this training, what do you need to do to be completely ready? First, go to the intranet, and locate the Emergency Preparedness Plan. You may choose to save a copy to your desktop. Just be sure you could find the plan if a surveyor requests it. Download the Emergency Plan checklist and the title pages for each appendix A through I. Complete all items on the checklist. There are items to be placed in the Rehab Agency compliance binder. Put those items in the binder as soon as possible. Practice managers or agency administrators will complete the items related to contacting emergency management agencies and will share information with you. Make sure that all staff are aware of the items on the checklist, such as the clinic or facility's safe place and the gathering place for assembly after evacuation. Finally, if you have questions related to the Emergency Preparedness Plan, you can contact Laura Nicholson, Director of Medicare Enrollment and Compliance.